Welcome to Stayf Draws. I'm Stayf, an illustrator and animator, and in this video I'm going to do a pastel painting in Procreate. So let's get to the video. This is the first video I'm going to do in real time. It's 1.5 hours, so grab some tea or something else and enjoy. In this tutorial I'm going to paint this image, and I took a picture of it because I was walking in a park and I saw a tree that was fallen down. It was a very interesting thing to see because you could see the roots on the back, and I have another picture of that. And also, to see what happens when a tree falls over, because it's broken here in the middle. And what's also interesting in this picture, and I'm going to do that in my pastel drawing as well, or pastel painting, because sometimes they're called paintings, is the sun. And the sun just comes from here and it's very bright. This is the widest part of the picture. And then you get very interesting shadows. And I'm going to use a monochrome color scheme, which is I think the most simple color scheme you can use. That's the use of one color. And especially in winter there is not that much light, and this picture was taken around 4 or 5 p.m. So then the sun is a lot lighter and you get very strong shadows. And when there is not that much light, the colors will also fade. So that's why I'm using the monochrome color scheme. And here's a picture of the roots of the tree, which is very interesting to see. We're not going to use this, but it's always good to see, as reference how snow works and the shadows in the snow. And here's another picture. But we're going to use, and here's another picture of a tree and the snow that has fallen on the tree. And it's very interesting how, the snow falls on the parts of the tree and the structure of the tree. So I'm now going to open Procreate, and I'm going to make a new file. And you can do that by pressing on the plus sign on the upper right corner. And then you get a lot of default sizes, or you can make your own sizes by pressing on new canvas. But I'm going to choose A3 paper, which is 420 by 297 millimeters at 300 dpi. When you start out in Procreate, the background screen is always white. But when you work with pastels on paper, most of the time you work on tinted paper, and I'm also going to use it here. And when you press on the layers, you can press on the background color, and there you can change the color of your background. That's the only thing you can do with the background layer. And I'm going to choose blue because that's the color I'm going to use, and I'm going to use all these values to paint the picture. And what you can do is, if you want more values, just pinch out, and then you just have a lot more options for the values. And I'm going to choose a value around here, and now it is set to layer 1. And I'm going to use the charcoals, and when you press on the brushes, you can see it begins with sketching, but you have to scroll to the right or to the left, but then you see charcoals. And for the basic setup of this painting, I'm going to use charcoal block, which has a nice structure to it. And I'm going to choose a different color. So I'm first going to paint the sky, and I'm using the Apple pencil to do that. and I'm using the tilt function. And I'm gonna set everything to 100%, so the brush is at 100% and also the opacity is at 100%. And now I'm just going to paint in the sky and the widest part, because here is the sun, there it will be pure white. And there's a neat little trick you can do when you want to have pure white, because I don't think this is pure white, and you can check it when you press here. It's 254, but it needs to be 255 by 255, and the hex code has to be 5Fs. So what you can do is go back, tap on it twice, and now you have total white. You can see it here. It's 255 by 255. So let's go back and just paint the widest part, because here is the sun. And I'm just doing it pressing really hard. And then I apply it a little bit more subtle. And you see the brush cursor. You can see the size of my brush. And I always like to have that set, because you can change that. When you go to the Actions panel, to Prefs, you can adjust the brush cursor. Now it's on, and you can also toggle it off, and then you don't see the brush you're working with. So I'm just going to toggle it on, and now you can see the brush size you're working with. And this brush has a nice structure to it. And the snow I'm going to paint a little bit darker. Because everything here will be darker than here, because you have the shadows that fall onto the snow. And what you also can do, and I never use that feature in Procreate, but now with Pastels, that's common practice. If you're laying out your basic painting or the primer of your painting, is that you will smudge it with your fingers. And there is also a smudge tool, and I want to have the same brush as I'm painting with, and you can do that by just holding the smudge tool, and then it will select the same brush you're painting with. So when I apply it now, you can just smudge the colors so that it will blend more. But you'll lose the structure of your charcoals or your pastels. But it's similar when you do pastels on paper. When you smudge it, you will lose the structure. And here I'm going to draw a darker part, because I'm going to paint, and I'm going to make the brush a little bit smaller. And here I'm going to paint the horizon, and you can do that by hand, but when you draw a line and hold it, it will create a quick line, and then you have a straight line. So that's a nice basic line, you know, you can use. I'm also going to paint some buildings that are in front of the sun, and then just block it out. And they're real black because the light is coming from the back. And that's a very handy feature you can use, you know, because then you don't have to paint all the details of a building. And I'm going to paint another one here. And maybe a side view. But you also need some perspective, and in Procreate there is a great tool, but it's an in-app purchase, and you just have to go to the actions button, canvas, and when you buy it you have the perspective guide. When you toggle it on, you can edit your perspective, and I'm going to press on edit perspective guide. And then you get a new window, and there you can set the perspective. And I'm going to use a 1-point perspective. And when you press on the screen, you can set it. And you can also, I'm going to zoom in a little. I'm going to make it a little stronger so that you can see it. And this is very handy if you want to paint something in perspective. And also the shadows I'm going to draw have to be in the perspective. So I think the vanishing point will be around here. Then you click on done. Then you have set the perspective. And what you can do is also select the perspective guide and press on assist. And then everything you draw will snap to the grid of your perspective guide. But I'm not going to use that because I'm just going to use this as a reference, and otherwise it will be it's more of a painting. And when you press it again, let me see, now you see it's assisted, and when you press it again it is gone. So I'm going to paint a building here, and that's going to be a little bit lighter because the light is falling on this part. Just make it a little bit lighter. And then you can draw it in perspective just using the guides. So this is one part of the building, and I'm just blocking in the basic shapes. There's also the other side, but I'm going to paint that darker because the light comes from here, so this part will be darker. And you can be a little bit messy in this stage because we're going to perfect it later on. And here are the roof parts. I can make that a little bit darker. Now I'm selecting the color with my finger, because you can set that in Procreate, or you can press on the little square here between the sliders, and then you can pick your color with your Apple Pencil. So you have to press it and hold down your Apple Pencil, and then it will select the color. And I'm going to make it a little bit darker because it really is behind. You can also, use the perspective guide to paint the roof in the right perspective. and this will be a lot darker. So this is the background of the image, and now I'm going to add a new layer. You can do that by pressing on the layers button and then press on the plus, and then you've created a new layer. And in this layer I'm going to do the trees in the background, and I'm doing that because I can later change it. And if you do that on top of this layer, then when you make a mistake you have to paint everything over again. And since we're working digital, you know, that's the nicest thing about working digital on the iPad. So I'm going to choose a little bit of a darker color because the trees will be in silhouette. And I'm going to use a different kind of brush, a 2B compressed, and I'm going to change it a little. I'm going to set the brushes to a little bit of a taper, and you can do that by changing the size. And there you see that this is tapered, and it will get bigger when you press on your Apple Pencil. So I'm just going to paint in some trees in the back. Just checking if I'm on the right layer, and it can be a little bit darker. So when you press harder, you get a thicker stroke. And the interesting thing about, you know, painting trees in winter is that you can see the whole structure of a tree. And they're all a little bit different. And the trees will taper, and then I'll just choose a smaller file size or a brush size. There's one here. Make it a little bit bigger. And the silhouette is strongest here because you have the backlight of the sun. So I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, so I can make the silhouettes a little bit stronger. And with the trees, it will taper down to smaller branches. So that's good if you have a reference picture, so you can look at that reference to see what the branches are doing, or you know, that every tree is unique and has its own way of growing. just zooming in a little and make the brush smaller, because when you draw with a tilt, the brush will get bigger, and when you press it, when you hold your Apple Pencil straight, it will draw a thinner line. So you can also play around with that. So, you know, now it's very small, and when I'm using the tilt, the brush will get smaller, and then you don't have to change it all the time. I'm just going to toggle off the perspective guide because it's a little bit in the way. I'm just using the picture as a reference, and I'm not really copying it, but just looking at, you know, what the trees and how they taper. And you just have to keep painting the branches and don't make them too straight, because they're quite erratic. And this tree I'm not going to paint totally, because in front of this background there will be a bigger tree in front, just to make a better composition. And this is going to take a little while. I'm not doing any time lapses so that you can see how long it takes to make this painting. And I'm going to paint another tree which is a little bit bigger, just in front here. And it's always good, you know, if you're doing a composition, don't use even numbers. So I'm going to paint 5 trees instead of 4. And I'm going to use a little bit of a darker color. And this is a little bit bigger because the tree comes closer to the viewer. So I'm now finished with the trees layer, and I'm going to select a new layer, and in that layer I'm going to draw the tree that's fallen onto the ground. So I'm now going to select a new layer for the fallen tree, and I'm not going to name them. And I'm going to use the to be compressed brush. And I'm also going to use the perspective guide just to draw it in the right perspective. And I'm just going to tilt the canvas a little and see how big the brush size is. It's going to be, I can do it a little bigger. Because it lays out here. I'm just going to draw the basic shape, and it's all in black, and later on I can add the structures to it. And I'm going to use, because this has a contrast with the black of the tree, so I'm just going to draw it a little bit up. And here is another tree trunk. And here it's broken. Maybe some trees up here or some trunks. So it's first a silhouette. So you can just, lay out the basic shape of the tree that has fallen. And here's a bit of a shadow, of course, because this is where the roots of the tree will come out. And because I have the white part of the building, this will pop out a little bit more. And what I now can do is, because this is a little bit too smudgy, this part. Just going to select the eraser and I'm going to hold it so I have the same brush I'm painting with. So now I can erase it. And because I'm on a separate layer, you don't erase the rest of your image. I'm just painting some smaller branches to give it a little bit more of a structure. And this is all in silhouette because the light is coming from here. And I'm not going to paint this part because there will be a bigger tree in front of this. And I'm now going to select a new layer just to draw the front tree. I'm going to use a different brush, the burnt tree, which has a lot of structure to it. And I'm going to make it rather big. So now I have a new layer, and on the new layer I'm going to paint the tree in the foreground. And that's going to be really black because the light comes from here, so everything in front will be a lot darker. And I'm just blocking it out. And there also will be a tree trunk like this. And this is of course not really interesting. I'm just going to toggle off the perspective guide because it's a little bit in the way. Also good practice is, a lot of artists just step back just to look at their painting and see it a little bit smaller. But in Procreate you can just zoom out. Then you can see if your composition is working or not. I'm just going to select a different color, and not going to use a lot of color in this tree because it's blocked by the sun, or the tree is blocking the sun. And this brush really has a nice structure. It's also called a burnt tree. So you don't have to paint that much and just let the structure work for itself. And you can play around with the different values and creating a more detailed tree, because this tree is, you know, closer to you, so it will have more detail. But this is just the layout of your drawing, and later on we're really going to do more details of the tree. So I'm just going to leave this here, and I'm going back to the back layer, and this is the background, and I'm just going to add some details to that, and then going to work on the other layers as well. So in that way you can build up your painting. And I used a different brush for that. I think the charcoal block, I'm not sure anymore. Because I want a little bit more light, because this trunk is hiding it. It's a bit of a leaking color. Tap it twice to have pure white. And the buildings can be a little bit darker. Not too dark, otherwise there will not be any contrast with these trees and the front tree. And I'm just going to paint in some indication of windows with a darker value. And they're just, you know, simple strokes. Because these buildings are a little bit further away, so they won't have that much detail. Maybe draw in a window here. Well, that's wrong. If you make a mistake, just tap with 2 fingers, or you can press on the undo here, or with 2 fingers on the screen. Well, there's going to be one window in the middle, so that's around here. And this pops out a little bit more. And the window is going to be a little bit wider because the sun is shining on it. And it's just an indication, you know, it's always good to zoom out and see if it works. There's also snow on top of the buildings and of the roofs. I'm gonna make this even darker. And I'm gonna add some white. Because that's on top of the roof. I can make some branches out of this, so that can be a little bit darker, so that it will blend a little bit better. And it's just an indication. Now I'm going to move to this building, and the sun is coming from here, so there will be a gradient that goes to the left. So I'm just going to select this color, and I'm going to select a little a value that's darker. Just going to set this, do this very subtle. It's a little bit too subtle. And I really like the structure of this brush. And just select the color because this is a little blurred. I don't want. And now I can paint in the windows. And I'm just going to set the perspective or turn the perspective grid on so that you can see that you draw it in the right perspective. are some windows up here as well. And just align them. There are also some windows on this part, but they're in a different perspective. These are straight. That's a little bit too strong. Whoops. Just zoom out a little. And I'm now going to make a separate layer just for the shadows of the trees. I'm going to draw that on top of what's behind the front tree. So I'm going to make a new layer here. And with shadows, it's always good practice to set it to multiply. Then the shadows will take over the structure that is underneath. And I'm leaving the perspective guide on. Well, that doesn't really work, because the perspective will be different. Because the light comes from here and then the shadows will fall differently. Make it a little bit more of a color. Make it a little bit more interesting. And the shadows are stronger at the base, and they will become weaker up here. And they're very long shadows because the sun is very low. There's a tree up here as well. Now you can just use the eraser because you're on a separate layer and just weaken the shadows up here. I'm also going to add another layer, and that's going to be the layer for the snow. And I'm going to use a different brush for that, the 2B compressed. Then you can add some snow to it, and when you make a mistake you can just delete it. That's always the magical part, you know, of snow landscapes. You have a very nice contrast with the white. And your trees will pop out more. Also, I'm going to paint the snow on the fallen tree. And the snow is the lightest on top because the light is shining on top of it, and then it will become a little bit darker. This is the basic setup of the painting, and now we're going to add the details. And I'm first going to the background layer, and I'm going to work my way up again. So I'm first going to paint the house and do some details there. And I'm using the 2B compressed. I'm now painting with a smaller brush, so then you can add a little bit more details. And if you do this with real pastels, sometimes you use pastel pencils to do the details. And you need to be careful with this brush, because when you tilt it a little, the brush will be bigger. It's not really detailed because the basic or the main focus needs to be on this tree. just going to draw in some windows, but it's just an indication. Maybe add some more light to the trees. A little bit more structure. This tree can be a little bit darker. It's all about contrast, and you can achieve that with using the different values in a color. I can merge most of the layers. Just gonna leave the front layer or the tree in the front separate, and you can merge the layers by standing on the top and the bottom layer and then squeeze them together. And then you have one layer. Maybe add something of a bush here. And lighten it up a little so that you have a little bit of a structure of a shrubbery or a bush. And sometimes just zoom out to see what needs to be fixed. And you just have to play around with the values, you know, to create different points of interest. Just gonna add some highlights so that the shrubbery will pop out a little bit more. There's of course also snow on the shrubbery. But it's a little darker because it's in the shadow. This has to align with this one. There's also snow on these rooftops. I'm just going to add some highlights to the sides of the trees. So that they will stand out more. just adding little details and, to make structure in shrubbery and to let things stand out a little bit more. It's all about working with dark and light. And I'm going to make the shadows a little bit darker. So I'm going to add a new layer again. Just going to select the color and make it a little bit darker. There's also a shadow under the fallen tree, and that's the darkest shadow. A little bit too dark. And I'm going to merge them again. Now I'm going to add some footsteps, and also, I'm always, merging and creating new layers, because now I'm finished with the background and now I'm going to do the details of footsteps. So the footsteps are highlighted up here, and it will be, darker underneath, because that's where the shadow is. Maybe add some more value to the color. And in this way you add some more structure to the snow. Now I'm going to blend it a little bit more with a bigger brush. Smooth it out a little, and I lost the structure here in this part. So just add some highlights. Here I'll make the snow a little bit lighter. It's always nice if you have a structured brush so you don't have to paint everything by hand. Now I'm going to switch to the foreground and to the tree in the foreground. And I'm first going to add some snow. And I'm going to use a different brush, the 2B compressed. Just follow the structure of the tree a little bit, and that's where the snow has fallen on. It's going to be a little bit darker here. I'm going to paint a little bit of a structure in the tree. Just using pure blacks. Just using pure blacks. Just going back to the burned tree, because that brush has a little bit more structure. and then you can just let the brush do its work. And the painting is almost done. So now I'm going to merge all of the layers. And on top of it, I'm just going to add an extra layer, and I'm going to set it to multiply. And with that you can just enhance your total image. And I'm using a real structured brush, the burnt tree. So it's much darker here. And on top of that I'm going to add another layer, and I'm going to set that to lighten, and that's for the highlights. maybe it's better to set it to overlay. Let me see where it is. Here. I'm going to let the sun bleed a little bit on top of the entire drawing. Just going to add some more highlights. And you of course have to sign it. And this is how you can paint a winter landscape with the Apple Pencil in Procreate with the charcoals. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you like it, please give it a thumbs up or subscribe to my channel. In that way you won't miss a single video. Drawing is fun and practice makes perfect. See you next time. Doodles!